Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I know we have folks from all around the world joining us on our official YouTube live that sort of follows up our life of a CISO. And this is your opportunity to ask whatever. And I literally mean whatever questions. We have a lot of fun here. Like I said, it's really about life of a CISO. But if you really step back, it's being a world class CISO. And to be a world class CISO, you need to be world class. You need to dominate your health, your mindset, your relationships, right, and work. So we cover everything. So whatever questions you have, if you got questions on fitness, exercise, mindset, I know we talked about stoicism the one time. We've talked about different exercise routines, and it's all game, it's all fair game, and it's all fun. And I love how eager we are because we already have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions ready to go. I was just like starting with some little interesting fact or story. I don't watch TV. I'm not a big sports person, but I think it's a requirement that every gym has every sports channel on the planet. So as much as I can't help it, right, when I work out this morning, there's like 14 TVs and they have all the different sports networks and channels on there. And interesting fact, who is the most sacked quarterback in the NFL? Who is the quarterback that gets sacked the most? He has the most sacks where he has been sacked, but basically he didn't get the ball off, he didn't throw the ball, pocket collapsed on him, right? Being sacked as a quarterback is not a good thing, right? It's not something you often associate with elite quarterbacks. But would you believe, because it's true, that the number one sack quarterback in the entire NFL is nothing but yours truly, Tom Brady? Now, here's the interesting thing. If all you do is get sacked, you get known as that. But does anybody know Tom Brady as the quarterback that doesn't throw the ball, as the quarterback that gets sacked, as the quarterback that gets collapsed in the pocket? No. Everyone knows him as breaking every record, right? Having tied Super Bowl rings, all these things. But the funny thing is, the quarterback who some would claim is the best quarterback in the NFL, some could also claim, according to stats, is the worst quarterback, according to stats. So the interesting thing or the data point about it is, to be the best, you got to take chances. Right? To be the best, you got to get sacked. To be the best, you got to be willing to sit in the pocket a little too long, right? And realize, I shouldn't do that again. So I always love those facts because we often look at someone like a Tom Brady and think they're perfect, think they've never made mistakes, right? Think everything works out great for him. But then you hear a stat that he's also been sacked more than any other quarterback. And you're like, okay, it makes sense, right? He plays risky. He plays full out. And it sometimes works and it sometimes doesn't. So it's okay if you got some negative stats on you. But as long as your positive stats outweigh your negative stats, that's what it's all about. And I often, when I coach folks, I'm like, maybe you're playing it too safe. Maybe you need to get sacked a few more times. Right? Maybe you need to take a few more chances and really push the limits or push the envelope out there. So just sort of leave you with that thought. We begin a new year, January. I think this is our second live for 2023. But just a question for you. Are there areas in your life where you're playing it too safe? Are there areas in your life where maybe you need to get sacked a few more times, right? Maybe you need to push the envelope a little bit and live a little bit more on the edge. So just sort of an interesting thought there. Today's winner of the first question goes to Ray's Cyber Cafe, right? So Ray gets us there. Good morning, my friend. Eric, how important do you see privacy for a CISO, both privacy engineering and compliance with CCPA, GDPR, and so on? The way I always look at it is, if you do security correctly, if we're really focusing on security across the board, and just so we're clear, my definition of cybersecurity is about understanding, managing, and mitigating the risk of your critical data being disclosed, altered, or denied access. So essentially, cybersecurity professionals or a chief information security officer is really focused on balancing risk of critical data being disclosed, altered, or denied access. So if we want to use a little more formal terms, We're looking at the risk that we need to apply to our data of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. That's really the job of a CISO. If you're doing that correctly, doesn't that entail data privacy? Isn't data privacy just confidentiality and access control and managing that risk of who should or shouldn't be accessing that data? And then I would also argue that if you're doing security correctly, then you should, right, be compliant with most of the regulations. Now, some of the regulations, like the right to forget, and some of those are a little sort of weird or hokey and not sort of traditional, aligned with what you would think a security person would do. So those might need a little adjustment or changes on that front. But for the most part, if we're doing security correctly, then we should be encompassing data privacy and compliance. And the reason why I like to do it that way is because privacy and compliance just become risks that we manage, risks that are decided on by the organization, and then it works a lot nicer. However, the statement, if you focus on security correctly, you should accomplish data privacy and regulation. However, the flip is not true. If you only focus on data privacy and you only focus on compliance with GDPR, you won't necessarily be secure. And that's, to me, where a lot of companies get themselves into trouble. They're so focused on, we need to make sure we're GDPR or we have data privacy, we have all these components in place. And they're so focused on that they end up spending a lot of money and they're not very secure. And they end up missing certain areas or components. So to answer the question, yes, to me, it's a component of those areas for a CISO at a small or medium-sized organization. Now, if you start getting into $50, $60 billion organizations, then I could see the CISO might decide to have a data privacy officer report to them. They might decide to have a compliance officer report to him or her, right? They might decide to segment out those pieces, which is perfectly okay and perfectly legit. But in smaller to medium-sized companies where it doesn't make sense to have that office of security or those many folks, then yes, that would all be encompassed into the risk decision-making process. Because let's face it, whether your data is private or not is a risk. Whether you're compliant is a risk of whether you're going to be fined, right? Whether you're going to have legal action taken against you. So if we look at cybersecurity as really risk management on critical data, then data privacy and compliance fit nicely under that. And I do agree, Kevin is in the house. I love it. He hashtagged front row seat. Kevin, always a pleasure, my friend, to have you with us. How do you lay out a good security roadmap for an organization? Excellent question. So a lot of this is sort of where you're at. If you're a new CISO or an existing CISO, so first and foremost, you need to be very clear on what are you protecting. So you need to go in and say, okay, what are our critical assets and which ones map to which revenue and profitability? Because this is an area that we often miss, where security is asked to come up with a budget. And I see this all the time where a CISO or a security manager will say, hey, Eric, they're asking me for a budget for this year. What should I do? I say, show me the financials. And they're like, I don't know the financials. And I'm like, if you don't know the financials, how in the world can you come up with a security roadmap? Because let's just keep this super simple here. Is $1 million an appropriate security budget? Depends. If your company is making $50, $60 million in revenue and 30 to 40 million in profitability, $1 million could be that could be a reasonable budget for that size organization. Now, if your organization is only making $800K revenue and 500K profit, and you want $1 million for security, you'll be laughed out of the office. You're spending more than the entire company makes. That doesn't make any sense there. On the other hand, if it's a $80 billion company and you're asking for only $1 million, you'll also get laughed out of the company because it's way too small. So first and foremost is we need to understand what we're protecting here. So what are the critical business processes? We need to map those to the business units and then map profitability and revenue to each of those business units. So now I have an understanding that the overall organization, 100 million, and we have 30 business processes broken down into 8 areas. And this area is 30 million, 20 million, 10 million, 15 million. And we have the breakdown because now we can start to see if there's a business unit that's responsible for 70 million and another business unit that's only responsible for $1 million, then that's going to adjust how much we spend on security. And this is the important part. This is a CISO level discussion. Security engineers don't get this. Security engineers go, Eric, security is independent of budget. It's irrelevant. If something is vulnerable, it's vulnerable and it needs to be fixed. And if something is not vulnerable and it doesn't need to be fixed, then it's secure. So when you look at security, you're really just looking at the threats, the vulnerabilities that are out there, and you need to fix and address those issues. And it's totally, completely irrelevant of revenue and profitability. And that's why those people are security engineers and they'll never be a CISO, because that's not how a business runs. Right? I understand their point. Yes. Theoretical textbook discussion, security should be irrelevant, but it's not. Everything is related to the business. Everything is driven by the business. So you need to understand and map everything against that, and map everything against where that revenue. This is world-class CISO talk right here. If this is how you approach your security roadmap as a CISO, where you want the financials, you want to meet with the CFO, you want to map it to business units, you want to understand the percent of revenue and profitability for the overall company against business unit and map business process against that, we're talking world-class CISO level. I know a lot of people that have CISO titles that don't have this level of discussion, and that's why they're not world-class, because it's a business support function. It's whether we like it or not, in some cases, it's a business overhead. So we have to map it against the finances. And then once we do that, we then prioritize our risks and our exposures based on that percent. And then we present that to the exec. Here's the other mistake. Always present more and draw a line. What I mean by that is one of the big mistakes that people do when they're building out a security roadmap is they go to the organization and they say, here's my roadmap, and I would like $1 million budget to do that. So in their mind, $1 million is complete. You're saying if we give you $1 million, we will be secure. And we know that's not true, right? But that's how it's presented, because think about it. You didn't give them any other data. So now in their minds, okay, if we want perfect, complete, amazing security, it's $1 million. But if we cut it down to 700K or 600K, we can still get pretty good. And this is where all the problems occur. So what I do is I go with my roadmap and go, listen, here's the entire roadmap if we wanted to implement all the security issues that are out there. But I recognize this is not reasonable to our organization. This would cost $30 million, and I know you're going to fall off your chair, and I'm not asking for $30 million. So what I did is I whittled it down to what I thought the core fundamental things on our roadmap are that we have to do this year, and that's $2.5 million. But I just wanted you to see the big picture, that I started with 30 million and I whittled it down to 2.5, which I believe is the core minimal things that have to be done. Could you see how that is presented and interpreted differently. Now in their minds, they're like, oh, so this has already been whittled significantly. You already shaved 27.5 million off of this puppy. So we're pretty thin here. Right now, it's a different discussion. Now, if they go, we're only going to give you 2 million. We're not going to give you 2.5. Then you say, great. What risk would you like to accept? Because I believe 2.5 is the minimal levels of risk that I'm willing to accept. But if you want to spend less, then you need to tell me what risk are you willing to accept, because we can cut out this area here, but then that's a risk we're going to have to accept. Or we can cut this out, and and you see how it's a completely different discussion? We're now engaging with the execs, and they're part of the risk acceptance process, and then everything changes for you. Now, security is totally different. But for some reason in security, we've been given this bad playbook where we think we should go in, we should only present what we want, and then whatever they cut, we should accept, with no discussion of what the risk impact is to the organization. So that's, I know, Kevin, a long way of answering your question. I hope that gave you some data point, but that's how you build out that roadmap. It has to be interactive, understanding where the revenue and impact is, and then an open discussion with the executives on what risks are we and are we not willing to accept to whittle down that roadmap. Zach is in the house. Annual board meeting today, covering state of cybersecurity program. Not my first presentation. Been weaving some of your advice into it during the presentation. Any last minute wisdom? Relax. Right? But relax, you got this. And listen. Right? You're presenting to the board, but you're really there to have a conversation with the board. So once again, Zach, I'm always a little nervous because a part of me basically says, if you have the presentation today, and it's in a couple of hours, don't mess, right? The game's starting in a couple of hours. I don't want to give you some advice that messes you up or throws you off or anything else. So part of me says, just tell Zach to be Zach, right? And if it was in 3 or 4 days, it'd be different, but it's in 2 hours, so have Zach be Zach. However, I know Zach's world-class and can take a little constructive criticism, but don't let it throw you off your game. Don't let it mess with you. But the only thing I would give you as advice is make it more of a conversation than a presentation. I would pause periodically and ask the board question. Hey, do you agree with this analysis? Do you think this is an acceptable level of risk for the organization? I was wondering if there was any other questions that you have that you'd like me to cover. And just make it a little more of a discussion as opposed to a presentation. And then the other advice there is, you're one of them, right? Don't go in with this, oh, I'm going into the throne of thrones, the castle of castles, I'm not worthy, right? And all no. You're equal to them, right? They have different positions, they have different titles, they're in different stages of their life than you, but hey, you're there to help the business, you're there to support the business, and just go in with confidence. So that would really be the only advice is have confidence, listen, and make it more of a conversation than a presentation. What are the best daily sources for cyber news and information? That's a really good question. People always ask me that question, and it's so hard because where I'm at, I don't actually watch or listen to any news sources because people will tell me, right? I work with clients all the time. I'm always having calls. I'm always having discussions. I'm on the list of a lot of media and other areas. So folks are always pinging me, reaching out to me, feeding information and data on those different areas. So it wouldn't be one set source, but I would say LinkedIn, There's several cybersecurity news sources that are out there. Brian Krebs is a great source out there. I mean, he tends to be early on a lot of the breach data and stuff. But I would really just say get involved in some of these communities. Right, get involved in some of these security communities, whether it's on LinkedIn or an ISACA group in your area, or one of those. But just get involved in a couple of those news groups on social media, on some of those groups, and just do some quick spot checks. But then, as you build your network, you'll get to the point like me where it's just a natural thing, right? You're always talking to other professionals. I'm always talking to CISOs. I'm always talking to execs. I'm always talking to the media, and it's just a natural progression of information flow. I don't actually have a point in my day where I deliberately sit down and watch a news channel. Right. So in the beginning, you might have to do that to build the network, but it's really just getting that network flow that it's just integrated and a part of your job and what you do. Like yesterday was a great example. Is I'm glad I was wrong, and I'm still not sure if I was wrong. Right. And these stuff take 48 to 72 hours, but I sort of put my team and my EA on alert with the FAA shutdown that there's probably a cyber attack. Like I said, I still believe it is, because here's why. Those systems have so much failover and redundancy, they don't accidentally go down. I mean, you don't accidentally ground all flights in America for 4 hours, right? That just doesn't happen. So to me, there was definitely something that occurred there, right? And I still think it was some form of a cyber attack. No proof, right? Just Eric theory and hypothesis, doing this for a while. So that was one where when I heard that, I sort of told my EA, hey, if this does turn to the worst, right? Just know my schedule, know my alert. I basically, when I went to meetings, I had a suit on just to be safe, right? So it's those things where you're just constantly monitoring, tracking, and correlating data, and just looking at different options and thinking 5 or 6 moves ahead on it is really your best way to stay up to speed. Uh, is it a good idea for a first-time CISO to decide which industry vertical to gain business experience or to be open to all verticals? Well, I guess it depends. Do you have industry experience, right? If you have experience in a certain vertical, it's definitely a good starting point, right? If you've worked in financial sector for 20 years or 10 years or whatever number of years, and you know that world very, very well, then applying to jobs in financial sector would leverage and utilize that experience and knowledge. If you've worked in healthcare, might make sense to do that. So if you do have vertical experience, then leverage it. I wouldn't limit. I would still apply to other jobs outside that vertical, but I would sort of say, okay, I believe I have more expertise in this vertical than others. So that's where I'm going to put my initial energy and effort. Now, if you don't have vertical experience, if you've been a consultant, so I got to get my water in. Yeah, everyone always asks this is my new favorite water. It basically has antioxidants and others. That's why the color's a little off on that front. But it actually tastes pretty darn good and has some minerals and other stuff. But my goal is to do over 150 ounces of water a day, which means I'm always drinking, right? So I'll be chugging a little more water during this episode than I normally do. But not to get distracted. If you don't have vertical experience, not a big deal. So if you have it, leverage it. If you have it, try it. Don't let it limit you. But if you don't have it, then it's not really a big deal. Put the name of the game, and some people don't like when I say it, but it's a reality. Getting a job and looking for a job is a numbers game. I mean, it's really a numbers game. Now, yes, you might get boom, perfect. The moods are aligned. First job you apply to gives you an offer, game over. But very often it's a number. You just have to be out there, be out there. So I would never let a vertical limit the jobs you apply to. But if you want to heavily focus more on one vertical initially than another, that's not a bad idea to do. How to explain a mistake which was not intended. So, Tom, I'll try this, but I am not exactly sure where you're going with this because it's pretty generic on that front. So first and foremost, I'd be careful with words. I don't think anything's a mistake. I really do not believe people make mistakes. Now, I do believe at a given moment of time, based on the data that you had available to you, you made the best decision you could. Now, maybe the data wasn't good. Maybe the data you had wasn't good. Maybe it was limited. And maybe over time you got more data. So now, sitting later in a new point of time with new data, you're saying, I would have made a different decision. But that doesn't mean the previous decision was a mistake. You didn't have that data. At the moment, you did not have that data, even if it's something where somebody commits a crime. I believe at that moment in time, based on the limited and potentially inaccurate data, they thought the best option for them was to commit that crime. Now, afterwards, when they look back and they had new data, right, they probably said, yes, I should not have done that. And now with a new data in a new point of time, I would have done something different. But I believe that people do always make the best decisions they feel they can for themselves on the limited data or information. So on that context, Tom, whatever that is, and if you want to put more details, if I'm not answering it, you can, but I wouldn't do as a mistake. The way I explain things is, listen, based on the data that I had a week ago, this was the decision I made. And I thought it was the best decision. Now, based on new data and seeing the impact that it had, either on the business, on other people, or other areas, in a new unit of time, I realized I would not have made that decision. I would not have made that decision now. And based on that new data, here's what I plan to do to rectify or remediate that previous decision. But that's how I always go in and explain those type things. But I never used that word mistake. It was just at the time, you thought you were making the best decision. You now realize it wasn't, and you just would explain it in that manner. So that's how I would handle that, either generically or specifically on the job. But like I said, if that answered the question, great. If there's more data you want to provide, I can definitely help you out on that. How can we nail the technical aspect of the interviews? I guess once again, if we're talking CISO, you don't want to nail the technical portion because it's not a technical job, right? You're not interviewing for a technical position. So to me, I would divert, right? A couple things. If you're going in for a CISO position and they want to put you through a technical interview, it is not a CISO position because a CISO is not a technical position. So that would be the first sort of flags that are popping up in my mind. Go, whoa, something's off here, right? I'm interviewing for the position of a CISO. I want to be the chief information security officer, and you are only giving me technical questions to interview. Something's off, right? Something's completely off here. Second, if that's where they go, I would divert. I would say, listen, I have configured firewalls previously in my career, and I understand what a firewall is, and I'd be happy to talk about the strategic impact that firewalls have on the organization. But if you're looking for somebody to actually do hands-on implementation of a firewall and configure the rules and analyze the rules, then I don't think you're looking for a CISO. And I don't think I'm the right fit for that job because I'm looking to build a position where I can build a strategic roadmap and not actually be a technical engineer. So I'm not prepared right now to answer that question, because that's not aligned with the role that I thought I was applying for. And that's where you have to be willing to stand your ground. Right? You have to be willing to go, if I really want to be a CISO, and this is not a CISO position, I'm willing to walk away. So I guess to answer the question, you don't want to nail the technical, right? And if you do nail the technical, that should be red flags to you and them of, maybe this isn't really a CISO, because CISOs are not a technical position. You should understand the technology. You should know how to implement it, but you should not be focusing on hands-on knowledge and implementation of technology, because that's not what a chief information security officer is going to do. Why replication of data does not address the problem of ransomware. So there's backup and there's replication. A backup is where I take a current copy and I make a copy of it. So this copy doesn't change. This copy changes, but the backup I made doesn't change. So that's a backup. So a backup actually protects against ransomware, because I make a copy, the ransomware changes this data, but it doesn't change this data, so I can back it up and recover. Replication, I'm going in and I have this data here, and I'm saying any changes I want you to make here. So now watch what happens. Now, when ransomware hits this data and changes it, what happens to this data? It also changes. So now replication is constantly updating data to other locations. So now when you get hit with ransomware and your data gets encrypted, what happens to that data? It gets replicated to all the other servers, and you no longer have a backup. You no longer have a backup of the data. That's why replication and backups are different. They do not solve the same problem. They solve similar problems. Now, if you have a server here and the server crashes, replication is great, right? Because server crashes, I have another data. But ransomware, not so much, because when the ransomware encrypts this data gets encrypted also. So that's why a replication won't protect or secure, because as soon as it gets hit, all the other data gets altered and modified. For 2023 initiatives, should network segmentation be at the top of the list? Depends on what the list is, right? That's one that's hard, and the reason is I don't know where your organization's at. If you're telling me that you don't have configuration management, you don't have patching, you don't have authentication, you don't have two-factor, then I would say no. That network segmentation should probably be near the bottom of the list. On the other hand, if you're going in and you have all those things in place, then maybe network segmentation should. On the other hand, if you're doing a lot more cloud-based security, and most cloud-based providers already have the server segmented, and your users are coming in over VPNs or over SSL or the network, and there really is no network, right? The network segmentation, probably not so much. So generally, it will depend on how you're set up. But I will say, for the most part, unless you're still a traditional in-office practice where you have your own data centers, everyone's in the office, you have your own networks, everyone's plugged in, all those things, really with where we're moving, network segmentation is becoming really less of an issue. And it's so much more of application segmentation. So what I would look at is, on everyone's laptop or desktop that they're using, are we segmenting out the application? So if one application gets hit with malware, it doesn't impact the others. Are we isolating out laptops so if one computer gets compromised, they can't get access to others? So to me, I would put more energy and effort on application segmentation at the endpoint than data segmentation on the servers, and encryption segmentation where all your data is set up with different cryptographic keys stored in other locations, because where we're going with cloud and endpoints and accessibility anywhere, any place, anytime, the need and criticality of network segmentation is really becoming less and less important. And those other areas are becoming more and more important. What qualifications are needed for a CISO? Understanding business, understanding strategy, and understanding how cybersecurity works so you can explain it to executives and minimize and reduce risk across the organization. Base level. Then a CISO typically is going to have a team. So you also have to be able to manage people. CISOs are often going to have many competing tasks. So you're going to have to also go in and be a program manager. So it's really the qualifications for a CISO are really, you need to understand the business, cybersecurity, how to manage, engage people, and how to run and oversee projects. Now, the initial answer I was going to give you is really the qualification for a CISO is that you ace the interview. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, because at the end of the day, I've seen people with amazing qualifications that can't interview and they can't get a job as a CISO. And I see other people with minimal to no qualifications, but they understand strategy and business and security, and they can go into the interview and they can own it. And they can rock it and they can implement it and they can do it correctly. So really, we need to stop this idea that I need to have this amazing CV, because the CV only gets you an interview, or we need to have all these qualifications. What it really needs to be is, am I showing up like a CISO? When people talk to me, am I acting, behaving, and talking like an executive? Or am I acting, behaving, and talking like a security engineer? That's what it comes down to. So the qualifications aren't really as important. It's how do you show up? How do you behave? How do you talk? And how do you interact with folks that really at the end of the day is going to determine whether you are or not a CISO, and really whether you are or not a world-class CISO. And just because you asked that question, we are running a How to Become a CISO. It's my legendary, right, should be patented 4-step process that you can use to go ahead and get a job as a CISO. And it's in February, we're running it the last time live. I'm doing live Q&A, live teaching. After that, it's going to all be pre-recorded. So if that's something you're interested in, I just go to secure-anchor.com, go under training, and we have that course there that you can sign up for it. But yeah, that course is going to go into a lot more detail, right? 3 hours plus of what you need to actually ace that interview. But that's sort of the short answer. It's all about how you show up. All right, so we're getting some good feedback here, just some awesomeness, some mornings, some God bless yous. Excellent, excellent, excellent. What are the minimal internal reports a CISO should do, and to which audience? Once again, where are we on the maturity scale? Right? It all depends on where we are on the maturity of how well we're adapted. If you are already have a seat at the table, right? You show up to all the board meetings. You're one of the C's. You're one of the top 5, right? So anytime CEO, COO, CFO, chief legal counsel meet, you're there and you're working and interacting. Then probably you just need quarterly reports on budget and risk and concern, right? Because you're an executive. C's basically do high-level financial reporting. That's what a C does. Right? Vice presidents, managers, that's what they're basically doing. Their entire reporting is on money. Here's what we spent, here's what we made, here's profit, here's revenue, it's up, it's down, it's on track, any concerns, any issues. I mean, that's what an executive reports on. And that's how an executive works. So you would go in and you would indicate what you're spending on cyber, what the risks are, and what the projections for potential impact to the business could be. I mean, that's essentially what you're presenting on. What could happen? What will be the cost if it occurred? Likelihood of it occurred and cost to fix it. Now, if you're new and you don't have the respect and you don't have a seat at the table, you might have to do a little more. So you might, in those cases, have to go in and start showing number of attacks and number of preventions and some of the more data to prove that you're doing the job, right? And prove that you're doing it, some more technical measures. But as you gain the respect, your reporting is going to very quickly move. Technical is to prove you're doing a good job, and then revenue is to optimize and show that you're the right person for the job. So that would sort of be the reporting early on. Not a lot of trust, not a lot of respect, a lot more technical measures to show all the good stuff you're doing. And then you're quickly going to move to an executive with revenue, profitability, and impact to the business. Oh, thanks, man. This ain't looking good today with the turtleneck. I figured I try something out new today, right? It's winter time. It's actually not that cold outside here in Northern Virginia, but I figured I'd go the sweater look and see how that's going to work for me. So thanks for the positive feedback on there. Where do you start when you are told to build out a governance plan? How would you define its purpose? So I think you sort of answered it. What is the purpose? So that's what I always go in with our clients and our customers when they say, Eric, can you build us out an X plan, a governance plan, a security plan, whatever it is? I say, okay, what is the objective you're trying to accomplish? How do we measure success? What do you mean by governance? What is the problem that currently exists that you said we need a governance plan? Because to me, a governance plan is pretty broad. I mean, are you looking for a plan to build out policies and procedures? Are you looking for a plan to integrate security into the business units? I mean, it can mean a lot of different things. So the first thing you got to figure out is, what is the problem we're trying to solve? What is the goal? And how do we measure success? Because once I know that, once I know the problem, once I know what you're trying to solve and how you measure success, we can build anything, right? But that's really the first step. Is you got to understand, what do you mean by governance and what do you view as a plan, right? If you get that specificity, then you can do anything. But that's often the problem where there's a lot of disconnect, where somebody will say X, security or a CISO interprets it as Y, and we end up going like this. So it's very good to get clarification so you can always come together on what exactly do you want and how are we going to determine that I've accomplished what you wanted. Is API security a growing area of concern for CISOs? Yes, but I'd broaden it. Secure coding is a growing concern for CISOs, where API is a subset of that. So to me, application programming interfaces is a very narrow component. Yes, the fact that we're using other people's code, or we're sharing code, or we're getting code from other areas or resources, yeah, that's absolutely a concern. But to me, the bigger concern is software development. Who is building our apps? What is the code they're using? Is it public code? Is it private code? How is the code tested? How is the code verified? Are we doing static and dynamic code analysis? Do we have secure coding practices? Right? All those things are a growing concern because a lot of things are going customized. More and more companies are building out their own customized solutions. So I would broaden out the API piece to secure coding being a big concern area that we want to focus on. Regarding CISO qualifications, would you prioritize leadership and people skills, team building over business acumen, and both over technical skills? Once again, where are we at? And the reason I say that is, if you are interviewing for a CISO position, essentially, they're going to assume that you can manage people, and they're going to assume that you have the technical skills. So they're really looking for, can you interact with the business? Can you speak business? Can you understand business? Basically, The CEO wants a simple question. Can I put my CISO in front of the board and not have him or her embarrass me? I mean, I'll nail it right there for you. I talk to a lot of CEOs. I talk to a lot of executives. That is their number one concern. So many CISOs are way too technical. They don't always interact very well. They don't play well with other people. And CEOs are just terrified that they're going to hire this person as a CISO and it's going to be a train wreck. And they're going to embarrass them. They're going to embarrass the company, and it's just not going to work out. So during the hiring process, they might ask you a question or two about your management ability to manage teams, but it's really all going to come down to, can you talk business? Now, in my experience, once you get the CISO job, success and failure is really big on what you said, the people side. I've seen brilliant CISOs that know security inside and out, and they can present to the board and they can speak business, but they can't manage their way out of a box. And their team doesn't like them. Their team isn't effective. Nobody works. Nobody does what they're supposed to. It is just a train wreck from every single avenue. So depends on where we're at in the process, right? But yes, once you're a CISO and once you have the job, to be successful, you have to have people skills. You have to have leadership skills. And that's often the area that's lacking in most CISOs. So I'll say, Joel said, appreciate it. Zach said, do any of your services do resume review tune-up? Yes, as part of the CISO cert, which is our 6-month, it has coaching, it has knowledge transfer, there's all those pieces. That's a $10K price tag. That actually does have CV, resume tune-up, all those things. I personally review, go through, analyze it. So that's actually included in that package, which if you want to be a world-class CISO is our top package that I highly recommend. If you're looking for something a little smaller or a little more customized, just drop me a line, ecole@secure-anchor.com, ECOLE at secure-anchor.com, and I'll see what you're looking for, and we'll see if we can come up with something to help you out on that front. So Joel says, yeah, do you have any, once again, I really try not to sell on these unless the questions go there, but do you have any courses on sort of building and managing high performing teams? That's actually about a third of my CISO cert. So the CISO cert is about 42 hours of knowledge transfer. And about a third of that is on building, designing, managing high performance teams. And most of my coaching, we do 2-hour group coaching every month. And I would say probably a good half of that is really on that piece. That's where most of the folks that I coach really need help and assistance on. So once again, that would be the CISO cert. And you can either email me or go to our website to find out more details, but that would probably be what's best aligned with what you're looking for. And I love it when a plan comes together because we're out of questions, but guess what? We're out of time. We actually ran a couple minutes over, but I love my man Joel, and I wanted to answer his questions, so I figured we'd push it in there. Hope this was helpful. I just have one favor. If you find it valuable, if you enjoy it, please tell some people. Please go in if you have a minute now into social. Be like, hey, just got off Dr. Cole's live. Totally awesome. Definitely, you got whoever's interested in being a CISO, you want to catch it. Next week, if you could just put a word out there, little recommendation. Like I said, always love to have more people, always love to have more interaction. So if you're enjoying it, tell a friend. If you're not enjoying it, don't tell anybody. No, I'm joking. If you don't enjoy it, tell me because I love the feedback. But other than that, have an amazing week. Be world class, and we'll see you next week. Thank you so much and take care.